Remember back in 2009 when you went to go see Avatar in 3D? Well, Nintendo does. And they were like, hey, what if we made that 3D thing, but without the dumb glasses? And it was on a DS. And 2 years later, BAM! The 3DS was born. Now, I don't know about y'all, but the 3DS is the coolest Nintendo system to me. Like, not just the coolest handheld, but the coolest overall system they ever made. Because this thing just has so much charm, such a unique feel to it, that there really is nothing else like it. And there honestly probably never will be. But what makes the 3DS so great? Well, today, we aren't going to just talk about its vast library of incredible games, and not just its cool 3D feature, but all the little things that make the 3DS so memorable and worth keeping around to this day, even when we are in a Nintendo era of the Switch and where the 3DS has been phased out for a few years at this point. But before we get into the specifics of the 3DS, let's take a step back and see how it came to be. In 2009, people started to wonder when the DS successor would be taking shape, as no word from Nintendo had been made yet, and while people were happy with their DS Lites and the relatively new DSi and DSi XL released in 2008, none of these were successors to the DS, and people wanted a DS with more power, and overall just something new. So in March of 2010, Nintendo said, hey guys, we have a new DS in the works, and it's going to be more powerful, and it's going to have 3D in it and stuff. And that was all everyone needed to start speculating as to what the next DS would be. And some of these fan concepts are very, interesting to say the least. So in this time period between the announcement and E3 2010, fans were just going crazy trying to figure out what Nintendo had up their sleeves. But it wasn't long until June of 2010 at E3 when Nintendo finally showed us what the 3DS was going to look like. And a lot of people saw it and just went, where's the second stick? Even though the Vita wasn't out yet, people still wanted a second stick, as it was the standard method for controlling console games at this point. But this wasn't a console, it was a handheld. And where's that stick gonna go? There's no space, it would have just been dumb. The PSP and Dreamcast didn't need two sticks, so I think the 3DS can manage. So with the 3DS being revealed, we finally got a look at that sweet 3D. And whoa, it's a DS with a slider that controls the 3D, and you didn't need 3D glasses to look at it, and it was so cool? I mean, yeah, it was cool, but I'm not sure if it's this really huge selling point, let alone the main point of the console. But hey, you can't say it wasn't unique. After this E3 announcement, it would be almost another year until the 3DS released, and on February 26th in Japan, March 25th in Europe, and finally on March 27th, 2011 in North America, the 3DS was released with games and a price tag, neither of which were very pleasing. The 3DS launched at $249.99, and while that may not seem like a lot now, with the Switch being $300 and even the Switch OLED being $350, back then handhelds were seen as a cheaper entry into Nintendo's library. And that's evident with the DSi being $169.99 and the DS Lite being $129.99. So $250 was a little hard to stomach, especially with this launch lineup. Yes, Super Street Fighter 4 3D, which is cool I guess, but a pretty watered down version of the 360 and PS3 title, which was to be expected, but it still wasn't great. Madden, okay. Pro Evolution Soccer 2011, alright. Lego Star Wars 3, which isn't bad. A lot of people like those Lego series of games. Ridge Racer 3D, pretty cool, pretty good. Super Monkey Ball 3D, alright. 3D being added to the title is starting to feel like how 64 was added to every N64 game. Bust-A-Move Universe, okay. Samurai Warriors Chronicles, alright. Asphalt 3D, I mean it's a phone title, but not bad to be honest. Combat of Giants Dinosaurs 3D. What? Rayman 3D, which is a remake of Rayman 2, which is honestly pretty neat. And finally, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Shadow Wars, because I love playing Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Shadow Wars on my 3DS. But wait, nobody cares about any of these games, because Nintendo released launch titles too, and 3 of them at that, with the headliner being Pilot Wings Resort, which is honestly a pretty cool title, as I loved exploring Woohoo Island and the Island Flyover and Wii Sports Resort, so this is a cool little expansion to it. We also got Steel Diver, which is Steel Diver, a game that had a demo shown off for the original DS at E3 2004. I just know everyone was waiting those 7 years for Steel Diver. But the last game Nintendo had for the 3DS launch was Nintendogs. Plus cats. Can't forget the cats, guys, come on. So yeah, not a great library, but you did have some games to play. But you may be thinking, $250 for these games? Who would pay for that? Well, you're not alone in thinking that, as the 3DS was just not meeting Nintendo's sales expectations, with only 3.61 million sales in its first month, which makes it one of the fastest selling consoles of all time. So you're not alone in thinking that, as that's how Nintendo seemed to think everyone was feeling, as 3.61 million units was not enough, as they plan to sell 4 million. Oh, Nintendo, you guys, seriously? Whatever. It's fine. They decided that with these oh-so-terrible sales numbers, it was time for a price drop. So in August of 2011, they dropped the price from $250 to $170, the original price for the DSi. And for those who bought the 3DS prior to the price drop, they would receive 10 NES and 10 Game Boy Advance games to make the price they paid sting a bit less. So while this price drop helped get the 3DS more sales, what really saved the 3DS was the release of Mario 3D Land in November and Mario Kart 7 in December of 2011. And with that, the 3DS took off and finally hit Nintendo's sales expectations from then on. The 3DS had a rather weak launch year, with there being few titles worth playing, but those games worth playing were amazing. I already mentioned Mario 3D Land, but it has such a nice combination of the feel of Mario Galaxy and classic 2D Mario just thrown into 3D. And it is a perfect handheld game, as it has levels that don't overstay their welcome and control perfectly, while the game still has a lot of replay value and different ways to play that make it have so much value. While Mario Kart 7, it was Mario Kart. It kind of felt like a watered down Mario Kart 8, except we didn't have Mario Kart 8 yet. So while Mario Kart 7 did bring a bunch of new features to the series, like the individual kart customization and gliding and driving underwater, while also bringing over many features that were added into Mario Kart Wii, it feels pointless to go back to Mario Kart 7, with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe being on the Switch and also being able to be taken on the go. So while Mario Kart 7 was cool at the time and a pretty good title, it's not so neat anymore and more of a novelty title. But you already knew these games were important new games, but the 3DS did bring back one old game in its launch year and made it the definitive version, Ocarina of Time 3D. The N64 version is just not ideal in the slightest, with it being locked at 20 frames per second, somewhat annoying controls, and those dang N64 graphics. I love polygons! Ocarina of Time 3D updated the controls, graphics, and frame rate to make it the perfect way to play, especially with the gyro controls being implemented with aiming your bow, many other quality of life improvements along with that fact. And it was also a portable version of Ocarina of Time, which is also considered like the best game of all time to many, and that's just something you can't ignore. So the 3DS had a decent launch year with some great games, but not enough. And you gotta remember, there was no 3DS XL yet, only the original 3DS model, which, while a quality handheld, people wanted a bigger system like the DSi XL. So in July of 2012, we got the 3DS XL. And while I never had this model, everyone else seemed to, and for a good reason. This thing was the perfect way to play 3DS games prior to 2015, with it being a comfortable size with much larger screens. The only real problem I have with it is it just looks a little cheaper than the original 3DS, but overall a great redesign. So here we have 2012, the second year of the 3DS, and the year the Wii U came out. Yep. Lots to put in the history books there. When looking at 2012's games, we start to realize we can't keep looking at each year, because there wasn't always stuff going on in the world of 3DS all the time. How could you, Nintendo? 2012 was another light year for the 3DS, but it did have some staple titles, with the main one obviously being Animal Crossing New Leaf, which did come out here in 2013, but it was released in Japan in 2012, so I'm going to count it here. And this was just such a great entry in the series, and to many, myself included, the best one. With this being my first Animal Crossing game, I had a lot to learn, and New Leaf made it so easy to get into, with so much to offer, and some may say that New Horizons does that as well, and yes it does, but I like to fish in Animal Crossing, and in New Horizons, that means crafting a new fishing rod every 10 minutes, whereas in New Leaf, you just get to play the game. It's great. 2012 also brought with it New Super Mario Bros. 2, which kind of feels like a portable New Super Mario Bros. Wii rather than a sequel to the DS entry. And look everyone, we have coins. Yeah, New Super Mario Bros. 2 emphasized collecting coins, and I don't know why. I thought this was cool back in the day, but I was a dumb kid, and I do remember that I beat the game in like a day, which makes me think that this game is just a bit too short and just not that great to go back to. But hey, it did release. Many other games released this year as well, but not a lot of the standout titles people tend to remember with the 3DS, which may be due to the Wii U coming out this year and the focus being put there, and the next year Nintendo coming to realize that thing wasn't making money, so they would go back to focusing on the 3DS. So next in the history of the 3DS came the 3DS-1. In October of 2013, Nintendo released the 2DS. And while this thing definitely looks a bit interesting, it is still the full 3DS package, just missing the 3D, which is, I guess it isn't the full 3DS package then? Oh, okay. 2013 brought Animal Crossing New Leaf to the States, which is always a big deal. But another franchise made its move to the 3DS this year. See, Pokemon has always been one of Nintendo's biggest franchises, and for the first 2 years of the 3DS's life, it had stayed on the DS, but 2013 brought with it Pokemon X and Y, the first Pokemon games in the 3DS. And while these aren't many fans' favorite games in the series, they took large steps to make the game different from previous entries, with a completely new graphical style along with it. So now that the 3DS had Pokemon and other various franchises, many Nintendo fans had reason to move over to the 3DS from the DS. But things just got a little better in 2014 with the release of the first upgrade to the 3DS, which was creatively titled the New 3DS and New 3DS XL. This model received a pretty sizable upgrade in terms of power, and also this extra C-stick type thing that's pretty useless in my opinion, but it also received a built-in Amiibo reader, so you didn't have to use the adapter, along with better tracking for the 3D effect that nobody used. Except for me, I did use it, and still use it, because it's cool. Honestly, I'm a little sick of people dumping on the 3D because in some games, it genuinely helps gameplay and is used in some really creative ways. And while it can get annoying and it puts strain on your eyes, it was very cool. And this new 3DS model improved the 3D by a pretty large margin. This new 3DS model even had its own exclusive games released for it, such as, surprisingly enough, Minecraft. But what's even more impressive is the original Xenoblade Chronicles coming over. A Wii game being ported to the 3DS. That's pretty awesome. While these released in most of the world in late 2014, we wouldn't see the new 3DS systems here in the States until February of 2015, and I'm so glad I got them when they came out and only cost like $200, because now a used one is usually more expensive than a Switch OLED. And for those of you wondering, if you are interested in 3DS Homebrew, I highly recommend the new 3DS systems over the originals, as the extra power unlocks so much more potential and makes games run much better when emulated. And as always, there are links in the description on how to homebrew your 3DS system if you are at all interested. So, now that we have a wide variety of ways to play, whether it's the original models, the 2DS, or even the new 3DS systems, there was a 3DS for almost every price range, and now they can get to releasing some amazing titles. About halfway through the 3DS lifespan, we saw so many of its best titles: Kirby Planet Robobot, Metroid Samus Returns, an amazing remake of Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, a remake of Majora's Mask that became the definitive way to play it, just like Ocarina of Time, a version of Donkey Kong Country Returns that didn't rely on Wii motion controls, many more Pokemon games, a couple more Mario and Luigi games, along with many smaller but still amazing eShop titles thrown in there. But the biggest one was the release of Super Smash Bros. For 3DS in 2014. This solidified the 3DS as a must-have handheld for every Smash player. Not only did you have Smash 4 coming to the Wii U, but Nintendo's official handheld as well, for the first time, and nothing was compromised. This is an amazing game, and I honestly prefer the 3DS version to the Wii U version. And don't get me wrong, graphically, the Wii U version looks leagues better, but at the time, you just couldn't beat Smash Bros. On the go. And even in a day and age where we have a full HD Smash Bros. Playable on the go on the Switch with Smash Ultimate, Smash 4 on the 3DS still is a super novel and amazing concept. The 3DS really had so much to offer that kept Nintendo afloat during the era of the Wii U, as everyone waited for their next console to come out, and as 2016 came around, it was about time for Nintendo to tell us what their next console would be. And on October 20th of 2016, Nintendo announced the Switch, which would be a console handheld hybrid with some pretty decent graphical potential shown off in the trailer, which we now know is pretty subpar and not much better than the 360 and PS3, but still, that much power on the go can't be understated. With this idea of a portable console with way more power, fans believed that this would be the death of the 3DS. But oh, were they wrong, because they forgot how insane Nintendo is, and even after the Switch launched in March of 2017, Nintendo released a new model of the 3DS in July of 2017, with the new 2DS XL. This is just such a weird system, with there being no real reason to pick this up, but whatever. We're going through the history, so I gotta talk about it. The new 2DS XL is exactly what it looks like. The internals of the new 3DS XL, but without the 3D, and some other weird design choices. The top screen looks like a Google Pixel, which is odd, but whatever. It added another option for people who hate the idea of even having the ability to use the 3D on their 3DS for only $150, which, like, really, guys? For $50 more, you can get the new 3DS brand new, and even at this point, it probably had some sales or price drops to get it even closer to $150. So really, was it worth it to cheap out on the new 2DS? I mean, I don't know. This is just such an oddball of a system at such a weird time, but it's fine. When has Nintendo ever been known to make rational decisions? I mean, they're the company that made the Wii U and the Virtual Boy. So there we go. Not only do we have a plethora of 3DS models to choose from, but a whole new Nintendo system that just came out with its own exclusive titles. So now you'd think, okay, now they have to be done with the 3DS. But of course, as we know, that is incorrect, as we got more amazing titles in 2017 and 2018. Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, a new Pikmin, a new Fire Emblem, but mainly remakes of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which is pretty cool, as not many GBA games made their way to the 3DS, so a full remake of the first in the Mario and Luigi series is amazing, as the other titles are all playable on the 3DS now. But then, in 2018, Nintendo decided to remake Bowser's Inside Story for some reason. So yay for Superstar Saga, and I'm confused for Bowser's Inside Story. But continuing on, we got another Wii game ported to the 3DS, with my favorite Kirby game, that being Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, finally on the 3DS, and it plays great. So awesome to have it here. But in 2019, everything did finally come to an end, with the big title that year being Persona Q2, alongside Kirby and Bowser's Inside Story, with the 3DS finally being discontinued in September of 2020, almost 10 years after it came out, with there still being games that are actively being made for it, which is kind of crazy. But throughout this, I haven't mentioned one bit of the 3DS that happens to be my favorite, the built-in software. Oh yeah, we've got some classics from the DSi. You got the camera, sound app, photos app, and more. But we also got new software in the form of a literal internet browser that I used all the time when my parents took my phone away, because I grew up in the DSi and 3DS era. The 3DS also had its own eShop with many exclusive titles, as well as most 3DS titles on cartridge available for download. And even Flipnote Studio had a 3DS version that had online only in Japan, but still cool to see it upgraded on here. Street Pass and Spot Pass, where you could connect with other 3DS systems nearby and have their Miis visit your plaza and use them in games, which was a super cool feature that I'm sure I'll make a video on eventually. We even got a built-in game, so day one, even if you didn't own any cartridge games, you had a free game with Face Raiders. And honestly, this is a super neat pack-in title, and perfect for the 3DS. But above all this came Miiverse, which I made a whole video about, as I believe it is one of the coolest things Nintendo ever did. A social media platform for Nintendo games and fans, where they can talk about games, ask for tips, or even just talk about life, and draw whatever they felt like. Just so awesome. We've talked about a lot in this video, and I'm sure I missed a lot of games and even some software, and I didn't even mention any of the amazing limited edition systems, but maybe I'll talk more about all that some other time. The 3DS is just such a unique system with an amazing legacy that I hope we do not forget in this era of Switch and whatever Nintendo has up their sleeves next. But I just wanted to say thank you for being here, as I love making these videos, and seeing how much support I've gotten recently has been crazy. So if you did enjoy, learn something, or at least feel like you didn't waste your time, please hit that like button and consider subscribing so I know to make more videos like this in the future. And with all that being said, I hope you all have a great morning, afternoon, evening, and night.